In 40 years on this bench, I have learned to keep my face neutral. It is not natural. It is a skill built over years, the professional discipline of a person who is supposed to receive the worst of what people do to each other and respond with steadiness rather than reaction. The face of a system that thinks before it speaks. I have maintained that face through testimony about things I would give a great deal to unhear, through arguments so cynical they tested every year of restraint I had built, through moments that required me to breathe and wait and respond rather than react. On the morning of March 19th, I had to work harder than I have in a long time. What walked through those doors was not the most dramatic case I have heard. No weapon was involved. No one was going to prison. The dollar amount, while significant, was not extraordinary by the standards of civil litigation. What made me press my hands flat on the bench and take a slow, deliberate breath before I spoke, was the timing. The specific, calculated, deliberate timing of what had been done to a 64-year-old man named Harold Sutter, who had spent 38 years working for the same company and who had been terminated on the morning of March 1st, the day before his retirement was scheduled to begin. They had waited until one day before. I want to tell you this whole story. I want you to stay with me through all of it, because the part that matters most does not happen in a courtroom. It happens in a hallway. And if you are not with me when we get there, you will miss the only moment in this story that gives me any faith at all, so stay. Harold Sutter had spent 38 years as a maintenance supervisor at Keystone Industrial Manufacturing, a mid-sized facility on the west side of the city that made precision components for the aerospace and automotive industries. He had started there at 26, straight out of a 2-year technical program, hired as a junior technician to help maintain the equipment that kept the production floor running. He had learned fast and worked hard and been promoted to team lead within 4 years and to supervisor within 8. By the end, he was managing 11 technicians, overseeing a maintenance budget that ran into 7 figures annually, and carrying in his head the kind of accumulated knowledge about a facility, which machine had which quirk, which repair lasted and which one didn't, which vendor could be trusted and which one couldn't. That takes decades to build and cannot be replaced by any number of job postings or training programs. He was, in the plainest sense, irreplaceable, and the company had known that for 30 years. He had planned to retire at 64 for as long as he and Catherine had been planning anything together, which was a long time. They had met when Harold was 31, married when he was 33, and had spent the following 30 years building the kind of life that does not photograph well, but feels right from the inside. A house paid off in 2019, 2 children who were grown and doing well, savings that were modest but real, and Harold's pension. The pension was the foundation of everything. It was a defined benefit plan, the old kind, the kind that employers used to offer and largely stopped offering because they cost too much when employees actually collected. Harold had been contributing to it for 38 years, and the company had been matching those contributions, and on the date of Harold's retirement, the full amount would vest and become his to draw on for the rest of his life. The employer's accumulated contribution, at full vesting, was approximately $400,000, plus lifetime supplemental health benefits that the actuarial tables suggested were worth another $100,000 over a standard retirement period. The pension vested on March 2nd. The company terminated Harold Sutter on March 1st. The termination letter was delivered at 8:47 in the morning. Harold had driven to work in the dark, as he had driven to work for 38 years, parked in the spot he had parked in for 15 years, walked through the door he had walked through 10,000 times, and been met by someone from HR and someone from legal and told his employment was over. The stated reason was performance. Equipment logs not completed to standard. Maintenance reports submitted late. A pattern of deficiency that the letter described as having developed over several months and rendered his continued employment untenable. Harold Sutter had never received a written warning, not once, not in 38 years. His most recent performance review, 6 weeks before the termination, had rated him as exceeding expectations in 4 of 5 categories and meeting expectations in the 5th. He nodded just once, the way a person nods when words seem insufficient and they do not want to use insufficient words. Then he walked out of my courtroom to where Catherine was waiting in the hallway. I was told she had been sitting there the whole time, folder still in her lap, not checking her phone, just waiting. When Harold came through the door, she stood up and they held each other for a long time in the courthouse hallway while other people walked past them on the way to other cases. I did not see this. My clerk told me about it later. She had walked past them on her way back from the copy room and had taken the long way back. Catherine Sutter sent my clerk a note 3 days later. I have kept it. It is short. It says he went home and sat in the yard for a long time. He said he just needed to sit outside. I think he was all right. I have thought about that image more than I can count. A man who worked with his hands for 38 years, who drove to work in the dark and managed 11 people and kept the machines running and did all of it correctly for so long that the company had stopped noticing, sitting in his yard after the thing that was done to him was finally undone, not celebrating, not on the phone, not talking to anyone, just sitting. There is something in that image that I believe is true about a certain kind of person, the kind that keeps going when keeping going is the only option, that does not complain about the difficulty because complaining changes nothing, that builds a life through sustained daily effort, and asks only that the promises made to them are kept. Harold Sutter had been that person for 64 years, and when the promise was finally after everything kept, he went home and sat in his yard. That is what justice looked like on March 19th, not a courtroom moment, a man in a yard. I have also thought about Philip Garrett. I was told by Grace Nakamura that he left that firm within the month. He did not tell her where he was going. He said only that he needed to find a different kind of work. He was 29 years old. He had student loans and 2 years at a firm and a career that he redirected or ended, depending on how you look at it, because he could not sleep with what he knew. He had sat with it for 2 weeks. He had gone to work every day and looked at the file and known what was in it and known what was being done with it, and eventually he had walked into a courthouse hallway and made a different choice. I do not know what that cost him in concrete terms. I know what it gave Harold Sutter. That is the whole of March 19th, a man who worked 38 years, a company that waited until the last day, documents written in 48 hours, a young attorney who could not sleep. I have been on this bench for 40 years. I have seen a great deal of what money does to people when they have it and the person across from them does not. I have seen how power operates when it believes no one is watching and no one will push back. I have seen it go wrong far more often than anyone in any position of authority should be comfortable admitting. March 19th went right. Not automatically, not because the system caught what happened. The system was being used to hide what happened. It went right because Catherine Sutter made phone calls, because Grace Nakamura asked the right question about metadata, because Philip Garrett could not sleep 2 weeks in a row. Justice on March 19th was not a machine operating correctly. It was 3 people, none of whom were supposed to be the hero of this story, refusing to let it fail. Now, I need something from you before you leave. If this story made you angry, if you sat there and thought about someone in your own life who gave decades to a company and was discarded when honoring that became inconvenient, I need you to share this video right now, not in an hour, right now. Copy the link and send it to one person, just one, a coworker, a parent, a friend who is close to retirement and trusts their employer more than they probably should. Because Harold Sutter had Catherine. Most people do not. Most people get the termination letter and go home alone and believe there is nothing they can do. There is something they can do. They can call a lawyer. They can ask for the metadata. They can have someone like Philip Garrett in a hallway on the right day, and the only way that happens is if people understand that it is possible. So share it right now and subscribe to this channel before you close this page. Not as a favor to me, because I have 40 years of mornings like March 19th, and I am going to keep telling them every week. Another person who sat across from power and needed the room to work correctly. I am going to be here. Leave me a comment. I want to hear from you specifically. Tell me about someone you know who gave years to a job and was treated as disposable. Tell me what happened. Tell me their name if you want to. I read every comment, every single one. Harold Sutter is in his yard right now, or he is wherever people go when the thing that was taken from them is finally returned. I do not know what that feels like. I imagine it feels like sitting in a chair in the sun and not having anywhere you need to be. He earned that, earned 38 years. He earned every minute of it.